The war ended, the guns went silent, and the world breathed out a sigh it didn't even realize it was holding, but in the shadows of victory, something far more dangerous than enemy fire was about to challenge America's fighter aircraft. In 1945, the United States stood on top of the aviation world like no nation ever had before. American fighters ruled the skies over Europe and the Pacific. P-51 Mustangs hunted German jets. P-47 Thunderbolts punished anything on the ground. And carrier-based fighters dominated the oceans. It looked like an unbreakable dynasty. But history has a cruel habit of destroying what looks invincible. Behind closed hangar doors and classified meetings, the future of American fighter aircraft was being quietly dismantled, rebuilt, and nearly lost, not because of enemies abroad, but because of decisions at home. When World War II ended, America possessed the largest and most experienced air force in human history. Thousands of pilots, engineers, and aircraft manufacturers believed the future would belong to piston engine fighters refined to perfection. The Mustang was faster than almost anything else in the sky. The Thunderbolt was nearly indestructible. The Corsair had proven itself from jungle airstrips and rolling carriers alike. On paper, there was no urgent need to change. And that belief, comfort in dominance, would become the first crack in America's fighter aircraft legacy. Demobilization hit like a shockwave. Within months of Japan's surrender, military budgets were slashed. Squadrons were disbanded. Pilots who had survived flak, dogfights, and carrier landings were suddenly told to go home. Aircraft that had taken years to perfect were parked in desert graveyards, their canopies sealed, engines drained, and futures erased by peacetime economics. America didn't just stop building fighters. It forgot why it had built them in the first place. The nation assumed the next war, if it ever came, would look like the last one. That assumption was fatal. While America downsized, the world changed. In Germany, engineers like Messerschmitt and Heinkel had already proven something terrifying during the final months of the war. Jet engines were not a novelty, they were the future. The Me-262, despite arriving too late, had shown that piston fighters were living on borrowed time. America had jets too, but they were experimental, fragile, and treated like curiosities rather than necessities. Victory had made America cautious instead of curious, confident instead of desperate, and in aviation, desperation often breeds innovation. Inside American defense circles, chaos ruled. The newly independent U.S. Air Force was born in 1947, but with birth came identity crisis. What was air power supposed to be in a nuclear age? Strategic bombers grabbed attention, prestige, and funding. Fighters were suddenly seen as secondary tools, escorts, interceptors, support machines. The men who had won air superiority with fighters during World War II found themselves arguing against generals who believed bombers alone could end wars. Fighters, once heroes, were quietly pushed to the sidelines. This shift changed everything. Funding flowed into massive bomber programs while fighter development slowed, fractured across competing visions. Should fighters be fast interceptors chasing bombers at high altitude? Should they support ground troops? Should they escort nuclear bombers halfway around the world? Instead of clarity, America produced compromise aircraft, fighters that could do many things, but excelled at none. This was not decline yet, but confusion is always the first step toward it. Then came the jet transition, and America stumbled. Early jet fighters like the P-80 shooting star promised speed but delivered danger. Engines flamed out. Range was terrible. Reliability was questionable. Pilots trained on propellers suddenly found themselves wrestling machines that behaved nothing like the aircraft that had carried them through war. Accidents mounted, confidence dipped, and while America hesitated, another force watched closely from across the Iron Curtain. The Soviet Union did not hesitate. Using captured German technology and relentless focus, they pushed jet development aggressively. Their philosophy was brutal and simple: speed, climb, firepower. Comfort didn't matter. Longevity didn't matter. Winning the next war mattered. While America debated doctrine, the Soviets built aircraft to fight immediately. The MiG was coming, and America was not ready. The Korean War exposed everything. When American pilots first encountered the MiG-15, it was a shock bordering on humiliation. Suddenly, the skies were no longer uncontested. The MiG climbed faster, flew higher, and packed heavier cannons than many American jets. The myth of automatic American air superiority shattered in real time. It forced a reckoning that had been delayed since 1945. America, had underestimated the post-war evolution of fighter aircraft. Yet crisis breeds correction. The U.S. responded, not with panic, but with urgency. Fighter pilots adapted. Engineers raced forward. Aircraft like the F-86 Sabre emerged, not perfect, but deadly in the right hands. Dogfights returned. Skill mattered again. The balance shifted back and forth above Korea, proving something essential. Fighters were not obsolete. They were still the deciding factor worldwide in air combat. But the deeper lesson cut harder. Had ended the piston era, but America had tried to stretch it too long. Victory had delayed innovation. Peace had punished preparedness. The post-war years were not a golden age for American fighters. They were a painful adolescence, full of mistakes that would shape everything to come. But the deeper lesson cut harder. World War II had ended the piston era, but America had tried to stretch it too long. Victory had delayed innovation. Peace had punished preparedness. The post-war years were not a golden age for American fighters. They were a painful adolescence, full of mistakes that would shape everything to come. And as jets became faster, wars became colder, and nuclear shadows stretched across continents. American fighter aircraft faced a new enemy, technology itself. Speed increased faster than human reflexes. Missiles replaced guns. Radar replaced eyesight. The fighter pilot, once a lone knight in the sky, became part of a system, guided, tracked, controlled. Some called it progress. Others called it the death of the fighter ace. By the early Cold War, America's fighters were no longer just machines of metal and fuel. They were political symbols, technological gambles, and strategic statements. Every design decision reflected fear of the next war rather than memory of the last one. And beneath every rivet was a question no one could answer yet. Had America truly learned from World War II, or was it repeating its greatest mistake in a new form? As the Cold War tightened its grip on the world, American fighter aircraft entered an era ruled less by pilots and more by predictions. The next war, strategists believed, would not be fought with twisting dogfights or heroic close-range duels, but with blinding speed, radar screens, and missiles fired from beyond visual range. This belief reshaped everything. Engineers were told to design fighters that didn't need agility. Pilots were told they wouldn't need guns. And doctrine declared that the age of the dogfight was over, not because it had failed, but because technology was assumed to have replaced it. This assumption would become one of the most costly mistakes in American fighter aviation history. Missiles became the obsession. On paper, they were perfect. Faster than any aircraft, guided by radar or heat signatures, capable of destroying enemy bombers before pilots ever saw each other. The fighter's role narrowed into a single mission: intercept, fire, disengage. Guns were labeled outdated, heavy, unnecessary. Training shifted away from maneuver combat toward systems management. The fighter pilot was no longer expected to fight, only to operate. And in this transformation, something essential was quietly stripped away. Aircraft reflected this philosophy. Fighters grew heavier, faster in straight lines, and less forgiving. Maneuverability was sacrificed for speed and altitude. Cockpits filled with switches. Vietnam exposed a truth that post-war planners had tried to bury. Air combat is unpredictable. No amount of radar or automation can remove chaos from the sky. Technology can fail, but skill endures. The fighter pilot had not become obsolete. The doctrine had. And as losses mounted, the United States was forced to confront a brutal realization. It had designed fighters for a war that existed only on paper. The response was painful but transformative. Training was rebuilt from the ground up. Programs like Advanced Combat Maneuver Training returned the dogfight to the center of fighter culture. Engineers reconsidered everything they had dismissed. Guns came back. Visibility mattered again. Agility was no longer optional. The fighter aircraft was reclaimed as a weapon, meant to fight, not merely to launch weapons. This reckoning reshaped the next generation of American fighters. Designs began to reflect lessons written in blood rather than theory. Aircraft like the F-15 and later the F-16 were born from a new philosophy. Speed without maneuverability is useless. Technology without training is dangerous. And dominance must be earned every time the wheels leave the runway. These fighters did not reject missiles, but they refused to depend on them blindly. Yet even as these lessons were learned, a new danger emerged. Fighter aircraft were becoming incredibly expensive. Complexity skyrocketed. Development cycles stretched across decades. Each new aircraft was expected to do everything: air superiority, ground attack, interception, deterrence. This ambition created marvels of engineering, but also vulnerability. When a single aircraft becomes the solution to every problem, failure becomes catastrophic. By the late Cold War, American fighters were once again unmatched, but this time, dominance came with a warning label. Superiority was no longer guaranteed by numbers or simplicity. It relied on constant training, constant adaptation, and constant funding. The mistakes after World War II had taught America a hard lesson. Air power does not freeze in victory. The sky evolves, whether you are ready or not, and as stealth technology, digital warfare, and unmanned systems loomed on the horizon, a new question quietly replaced the old ones. Not whether fighters could dominate, but whether manned fighters themselves were approaching another moment of dangerous overconfidence. As the Cold War matured into something colder and quieter, American fighter aircraft entered a phase defined not by visibility, but by invisibility. Stealth was not just a new technology. It was a philosophy built on the fear of repeating past mistakes. After Vietnam, the United States no longer wanted fair fights or close encounters. It wanted the enemy destroyed before they even knew a battle had begun. Radar-evading shapes, absorbent materials, and classified design methods transformed fighters into ghosts. And for the first time since World War II, America possessed an advantage so overwhelming that it seemed almost unfair. Stealth fighters changed the meaning of air combat. Traditional measures of speed and maneuverability became secondary to signature reduction. Aircraft were no longer designed to look fast. They were designed to disappear. Pilots flew machines that radar could barely see, striking targets deep inside enemy territory with near impunity. Conflicts like the Gulf War reinforced the belief that America had solved air warfare once and for all. Enemy air defenses collapsed. Opposing fighters never got close enough to matter. The lessons of Vietnam seemed distant, almost irrelevant. But stealth came with its own dangers. These aircraft were incredibly expensive, difficult to maintain, and built in limited numbers. Unlike World War II, where thousands of fighters could be produced quickly, stealth fighters required specialized facilities, trained technicians, and flawless logistics. This meant American air power was now concentrated into fewer, more precious machines. Losing even one mattered. The margin for error shrank even as confidence grew. At the same time, adversaries were watching and learning. Just as America had once studied German jets after World War II, rival nations studied American stealth. They invested in radar networks instead of fighters, in cyber warfare instead of dogfights, in numbers instead of perfection. Stealth was not invincibility. It was a temporary advantage. And history had already shown what happens when temporary advantages are mistaken for permanent ones. Fighter pilots themselves felt the change. The role of the human shifted again, this time from warrior to system integrator. Pilots managed sensors, data links, and electronic warfare while trusting computers to handle tasks once governed by instinct. The cockpit became quieter, safer, and more detached from danger. Some saw this as progress. Others worried that the same complacency that followed. World War II was creeping back, only this time hidden behind classified technology. Training evolved, but tension remained. How do you prepare for a fight that hasn't happened yet? How do you test stealth without revealing it? How do you train pilots for enemies who might never show themselves? These questions haunted planners who remembered Korea and Vietnam. They knew the pattern. Victory breeds assumptions. Assumptions breed vulnerability. By the late 20th century, American fighter aircraft had achieved something unprecedented. Absolute dominance of the sky. But dominance created a paradox. Without equal opponents, fighters rarely fought fighters. Pilots trained constantly, but rarely tested themselves in true combat. The experience gap between generations widened. The skills were taught, but not proven. And in war, untested assumptions are the most dangerous weapon of all. As the Cold War ended, many believed the fighter's story was complete. No rival air force could challenge American stealth, training, or technology. Budgets shrank again. Production slowed again. Once more, the post-war cycle threatened to repeat itself. And once more, the world refused to cooperate with American expectations. Because while America focused on refining perfection, the future was shifting toward disruption. Unmanned systems emerged. Artificial intelligence crept into targeting. Cyber attacks threatened aircraft before they ever left the ground. The fighter aircraft was still powerful, but it was no longer alone in the sky. And the question that lingered after World War II returned in a new form. What happens when the next revolution arrives faster than doctrine can adapt? The era of uncontested skies did not end with a dramatic defeat or a single defining battle. It eroded slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly. As America refined its fighters into masterpieces of technology, potential rivals focused on exploiting the gaps that perfection creates. The assumption that no one could catch up became dangerous again, echoing the same mindset that followed World War II. This time, however, the stakes were higher, because modern air dominance depended not only on aircraft performance, but on networks, satellites, supply chains, and data integrity. A fighter no longer fought alone. It existed as part of an ecosystem, and ecosystems can collapse in unexpected ways. China and Russia approached fighter development with lessons drawn directly from America's past. They did not try to outmatch the United States in every category. They targeted vulnerabilities. Instead of pursuing absolute stealth, they invested in layered air defenses, long-range missiles, and electronic warfare systems designed to deny access rather than seek air superiority through dogfights. Their fighters emphasized range, speed, and payload, supported by ground-based sensors that extended far beyond the aircraft itself. The goal was not to win the sky outright, but to make American dominance costly, uncertain, and risky. American fighters, meanwhile, became symbols of technological ambition. Each new generation promised to be the last one needed, the ultimate solution. Development timelines stretched into decades, while costs climbed into hundreds of billions. Delays became normal, upgrades replaced replacements, and with every passing year, the number of operational fighters shrank. This was not weakness in capability, but fragility in scale. World War II had proven that air power thrived on numbers and adaptability. The post-war world had slowly traded both for specialization. Pilots trained harder than ever, but the nature of training changed again. Simulators became essential, not optional. Exercises relied on assumptions about sensor performance and electronic dominance. Yet real enemies do not behave like simulations. They adapt, improvise, and exploit uncertainty. The fear among planners was not that American fighters would lose a fair fight, but that they might never get the chance to fight at all. Trapped by logistics failures, cyber disruption, or denied airspace before engagement could begin. This fear revived an old debate. Should fighters be fewer and perfect, or many and adaptable? After World War II, America had answered that question too late. Now it faced it again under far more complex conditions. The answer was no longer obvious. High-end fighters could dominate, but only if they survived the opening moments of a conflict. And in modern war, the opening moments are often decided long before the first aircraft takes off. History's pattern was clear, even if uncomfortable. Every time America believed it had solved air combat permanently, reality proved otherwise. The piston era ended despite refinement. The missile age failed without balance. Stealth worked until others learned to see around it. Each revolution created advantage, and each advantage tempted complacency. The fighter aircraft did not fail after World War II because it was obsolete. It struggled because its guardians misunderstood the future. As the world moved toward hypersonics, space-based sensors, and autonomous systems, American fighter aircraft stood at another crossroads. They remained unmatched individually, but warfare no longer rewarded individual excellence alone. It rewarded resilience, redundancy, and rapid adaptation. The question facing the United States was no longer how to build the best fighter, but how to avoid repeating the same post-war mistake under a different name. The story of America's fighter aircraft after World War II is not a straight line of progress, but a repeating cycle shaped by human nature as much as technology. Each generation of fighters was born from the belief that the previous war had finally revealed the ultimate truth about air combat, and each time, that belief proved incomplete. After 1945, the United States did not lose its dominance overnight. It slowly traded adaptability for certainty. Fighters were redesigned to match predictions instead of reality. And when reality arrived, it never followed the script. What made the post-World War II period so dangerous was not the lack of innovation, but misplaced confidence. America had the engineers, the pilots, and the industrial power to lead the world, yet leadership created blind spots. The jet age arrived faster than doctrine could absorb. Missiles promised clean, distant victories that real combat refused to deliver. Stealth created near invisibility, but invisibility encouraged dependence. Every solution became a foundation for the next problem. This cycle reshaped institutions as much as aircraft. Decisions made in conference rooms carried consequences measured years later in the sky. Fighter pilots adapted again and again, often faster than the machines they flew. They relearned dogfighting when it was declared dead. They mastered systems when instinct was no longer enough. Through every shift, the constant was not technology, but the human ability to adjust under pressure. That truth survived every revolution in air combat. By the early 21st century, American fighters were no longer just weapons. They were national strategies in physical form. Their strengths reflected America's belief in precision, control, and technological superiority. Their weaknesses reflected the risk of over-optimization. When everything must work perfectly for dominance to exist, even small disruptions become dangerous. World War II had shown that wars are rarely perfect, and the years that followed proved that lesson again and again. What truly happened to America's fighter aircraft after World War II was not decline, disappearance, or failure. It was transformation under tension. Fighters survived every prediction of irrelevance, because air combat itself refused to be simplified. Every time planners tried to reduce war to equations and probabilities, reality introduced friction, uncertainty, and human decision-making back into the equation. As new domains emerged, space, cyber, autonomous systems, the fighter's role continued to evolve, but its core challenge remained unchanged since 1945, staying relevant without becoming rigid, powerful without becoming fragile, dominant without becoming complacent. History offered no final answers, only warnings repeated across generations. Even as America moved further into the Cold War and beyond, the story of its fighter aircraft became one of constant adaptation. Aircraft were no longer just machines. They were living embodiments of doctrine, politics, and strategy, and each redesign reflected lessons learned the hard way. Every failure after World War II became a blueprint for correction. Jets replaced pistons, missiles complemented guns, stealth compensated for dwindling numbers, and training evolved to anticipate the unanticipated. Yet every adaptation carried hidden costs. Speed and stealth demanded complexity, and complexity demanded resources, time, and flawless execution. While the world assumed that American fighters could always dominate, the reality was that each generation teetered between unprecedented power and catastrophic vulnerability. The rise of new technologies in the 1970s and 1980s, particularly electronics and computing, revolutionized the fighter once again. Cockpits transformed into glass towers of information, giving pilots capabilities undreamed of in the propeller age. Radar, heads-up displays, infrared targeting, and digital mapping made the modern pilot part tactician, part system manager. These advancements allowed fighters to strike farther, faster, and with precision, but they also created a dependence that was foreign to the generations of pilots who had fought World War II's visceral dogfights. The human element was no longer just skill, it was the ability to process overwhelming data streams while making instantaneous life-or-death decisions. Meanwhile, adversaries studied every movement. The Soviets, and later the Chinese, pursued countermeasures and tactical innovations that challenged assumptions of invincibility. Each new American fighter design prompted a response, a new radar system, a new missile, or a new electronic warfare capability. Dominance was never permanent. It was a chess game played at Mach speeds, and the cost of underestimating the opponent had always been fatal. This dynamic mirrored the lessons of the post-World War II years. Every edge could be eroded if overconfidence replaced vigilance. Fighter doctrine continued to oscillate between extremes. At times, planners focused on extreme specialization, air superiority fighters, multi-role strike aircraft interceptors, each designed to excel at a single mission. At other times, the emphasis returned to versatility, a philosophy born from necessity during World War II, when pilots and aircraft had to adapt to every challenge. The tension between specialization and adaptability became the defining narrative of American fighter development. Do you build for the perfect fight that may never come, or for the uncertain battles that always will? The United States struggled to answer this question while maintaining an edge over rivals, whose doctrines were simpler, cheaper, and faster to implement. Budgetary pressures imposed another constraint. Unlike the post-World War II boom, where sheer industrial capacity could overcome most obstacles, modern fighters demanded massive investment per unit. The days of producing hundreds of Mustangs or Thunderbolts in a year were long gone. Each F-15, F-22, or F-35 represented years of research, millions of man-hours, and billions of dollars. Losses were strategic, not just tactical. Even a single failure could reverberate across doctrine, training, and international perception. America's lessons from history were clear. Technological superiority is fragile when built on scarcity. Yet despite these challenges, American fighter aircraft remained unmatched in most respects. Pilots trained to near superhuman standards, simulations pushed human limits, and engineers pushed machines into realms that defied gravity, speed, and imagination. The post-World War II trajectory had created a paradox. Fighters were both the safest they had ever been and the most dangerous. In terms of reliance on perfection, the sky was dominated, but domination was contingent on systems functioning flawlessly, enemies behaving predictably, and decision-makers maintaining clarity under pressure. Through every evolution, one truth remained constant. The fighter never died, and neither did the necessity of adaptation. From the deserts of post-war storage to the jungles of Vietnam, from the radar screens of the Cold War to the digital battlespace of the 21st century, America's fighters survived because humans refused to accept obsolescence. History had proven repeatedly that failure followed arrogance. Success followed humility, flexibility, and relentless attention to lessons learned the hard way, and those lessons written in every rivet, missile, and cockpit display would echo through every generation that took to the sky. By the early 21st century, American fighter aircraft had entered a new era defined by fifth-generation capabilities, a realm where stealth, networked warfare, and multi-role versatility combined in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just decades earlier. The F-22 Raptor and later the F-35 Lightning II were designed not simply to dominate the sky, but to redefine what dominance meant. Speed, maneuverability, and firepower remained essential, but invisibility, electronic warfare, and interoperability became just as important. These aircraft were not just tools, they were strategic statements, symbols of technological supremacy, and platforms capable of integrating air, ground, sea, and cyber warfare simultaneously. Yet, as in every era since World War II, innovation carried a hidden cost. Complexity became fragility. The design philosophy of fifth-generation fighters reflected lessons learned the hard way. Vietnam had reminded planners that assumptions about the nature of combat could be fatal. Desert Storm and subsequent conflicts had emphasized the importance of precision and situational awareness. The Cold War had shown that adversaries evolve, often faster than technology alone can counter. Every element of modern fighter design, stealth coatings, sensor fusion, data links, software integration, was born of these cumulative lessons. Yet the more sophisticated these aircraft became, the more dependent they were on perfection in logistics, training, and coordination. A single failure in a network could render even the most advanced fighter impotent. A vulnerability unseen in the mass-produced propeller aircraft of 1945. Modern conflicts expose these challenges in real time. In theaters from the Middle East to the South China Sea, American fighters faced threats that could never be fully predicted. Sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems, electronic jamming, cyber interference, and even asymmetric tactics designed to exploit technological reliance. Unlike World War II, when dogfights could be won by maneuver, skill, and courage, today's victories often depend on invisible networks, data integration, and preemptive suppression of enemy defenses. The fighter pilot remains central, but the role has shifted from lone hero to orchestrator of a complex, distributed system where the margin for error is razor-thin. Emerging peer competitors have amplified the stakes. China's J-20 and Russia's Su-57 embody philosophies distinct from America's, emphasizing survivability, sensor fusion, and tactics optimized to challenge the assumptions behind fifth-generation dominance. These aircraft are not just machines. They are strategic statements designed to complicate American calculations. History repeats itself. Every time the U.S. believed it had solved air combat, adversaries developed countermeasures that exploited blind spots, forcing adaptation once more. Post-World War II complacency has echoed through every technological leap since, a reminder that dominance is always provisional. Budgetary pressures, technological ambition, and operational complexity collide in today's fighter programs. Each new aircraft requires years of development, billions of dollars, and sustained political support. Unlike the post-war years, when numbers and simplicity could compensate for imperfect designs, modern dominance relies on perfection across multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, stealth, speed, firepower, and integration. The complexity that grants power also carries risk. If supply chains fail, if software is compromised, If adversaries adapt faster than doctrine, even the most advanced fighter could face catastrophic limitations. Yet for all these challenges, the underlying thread remains unchanged since the end of World War II. Adaptation and human ingenuity are what sustain fighters' relevance. Pilots continue to train, innovate, and overcome limitations imposed by machines and doctrine alike. Engineers continue to push the boundaries of aerodynamics, propulsion, and sensor integration. Strategy continuously adjusts to new threats. History demonstrates that victory in the air has never been assured by technology alone. The lessons of post-World War II fighter development, overconfidence, complacency, and misalignment between doctrine and reality still echo today, demanding humility even amid unprecedented advantage. Modern fighter programs, such as the F-35 and emerging sixth-generation concepts, are shaped by this dual reality. Unmatched capability paired with unprecedented dependency. Each aircraft is a marvel of engineering, combining stealth, speed, sensor fusion, and network connectivity. Each aircraft, however, is also a highly complex system, vulnerable to logistics failures, software glitches, or adversary disruption. Where World War II taught that numbers and adaptability mattered as much as raw power, the modern era demands precision, foresight, and resilience across every operational domain. A single mistake, once again, could become catastrophic. Training has adapted accordingly, blending traditional skills with simulations of digital and cyber battle spaces. Pilots must now manage aircraft, drones, and AI simultaneously, making decisions across multiple layers of conflict. The human element remains central, but it is no longer solely about reflexes or maneuvering skill. It is about understanding, predicting, and controlling complex systems in real time. The cognitive demands of modern air combat surpass anything seen in the piston era, the jet age, or even the early stealth era. History has shifted the battlefield, from raw strength to intellectual mastery over chaos. Even as technology reshapes the fighter, the lessons of post-World War II remain relevant. Complacency, overconfidence, and a failure to anticipate change have always been the true enemies of air superiority. America's fighters survived decades of evolving threats, not because they were invincible, but because pilots, engineers, and strategists learned to question assumptions, adapt to reality, and prepare for what could not be predicted. The future will demand the same vigilance, magnified by the exponential speed and complexity of modern warfare. Once again, the cycle continues. Dominance achieved, challenged, adapted, and preserved through learning from the hard truths of history. The modern battlefield is no longer defined by isolated dogfights or clear front lines. Contested airspaces where advanced fighters must operate under constant threat from integrated air defenses, electronic warfare, and asymmetric tactics have become the new norm. Even the most technologically advanced American fighters, stealth, networked, and AI-assisted, face environments that challenge every assumption made since World War II. The lessons of history echo. Dominance is never permanent, and the complexity of modern warfare multiplies the cost of complacency. What once could be solved by raw speed or pilot skill now requires seamless integration of machines, networks, and human intuition. Any gap in that integration, any oversight, can instantly turn superiority into vulnerability. Adversaries have evolved to exploit this reality. Modern integrated air defense systems, long-range surface-to-air missiles, electronic jamming, and cyber capabilities are designed to negate the advantages of American fighters before the first shot is fired. These threats are asymmetric, often invisible, and constantly evolving. History teaches that underestimating a rival or relying too heavily on assumed technological superiority can have catastrophic consequences. Post-World War II complacency, when American planners assumed that victory and industrial strength guaranteed future air dominance, is mirrored today in the risk of over-reliance on stealth, networks, and automation. Technology is powerful, but it is never infallible. Pilots now train for scenarios that would have been unimaginable a generation ago, operating in GPS-denied environments, managing electronic interference, coordinating with autonomous drones, and making split-second decisions while monitoring multiple data streams. Every flight simulates a world where technology may fail, where enemies exploit weaknesses, and where traditional tactics may no longer apply. The human factor, judgment, adaptability, and creativity, remains decisive. Machines amplify capability, but humans must remain the ultimate decision makers. echoing the post-World War II realization that skill and intuition can never be entirely replaced. Even as the United States develops next-generation fighters, the lessons from history remain embedded in strategy. Redundancy, adaptability, and constant innovation are emphasized because every generation of fighter, from the P-51 Mustang to the F-35, demonstrates the same cycle. Innovation leads to dominance. Dominance breeds assumptions. Assumptions invite challenge, and challenge forces adaptation. The technological edge alone is insufficient. True superiority is maintained only through constant vigilance, relentless training, and the willingness to accept that no advantage is permanent. In this contested environment, America's fighter aircraft continue to embody the tension between power and fragility. They are unmatched in many respects, yet entirely dependent on systems, infrastructure, and logistics that can be disrupted. Modern air dominance is a fragile equilibrium, where a single oversight can have outsized consequences. This fragility mirrors the post-World War II era, when stored fighters, misaligned doctrine, and misplaced confidence nearly allowed obsolescence to creep in. History has proven that survival is never guaranteed, even for the most advanced machines, and mastery requires humility as much as strength. The cycle continues. Each technological leap provides an advantage, but also introduces new vulnerabilities. Each victory creates assumptions, and each assumption is eventually tested. American fighter aircraft, from the early jets to fifth-generation stealth platforms, exist not merely as tools of war, but as living reminders of the consequences of underestimating the sky. Contested airspaces in the 21st century are proof that even unmatched capability demands vigilance, adaptation, and the lessons of every conflict since the propeller-driven battles of World War II. The horizon of air combat is shifting faster than ever before. Emerging technologies, hypersonic weapons, autonomous swarms, cyber warfare, and AI-directed decision-making are redefining the very concept of fighter supremacy. America's fighter aircraft, while technologically superior, now face threats that no previous generation could have fully anticipated. Unlike World War II, when dominance could be established by production capacity, pilot skill, and aircraft design, the future demands adaptability to a battlefield that is as digital as it is physical. Every aircraft, every system, and every pilot is part of a dynamic network where information flows faster than human reaction, and where the margin for error is almost non-existent. In this environment, lessons from the post-World War II era are more relevant than ever. Overconfidence and complacency can erode advantage faster than any missile or jet could. Hypersonic weapons alone present a paradigm shift. A fighter that could once outrun or outmaneuver a threat now faces missiles traveling at speeds beyond human perception, capable of striking before traditional defensive systems can respond. AI-controlled swarms of drones could overwhelm even the most advanced air defenses, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously, while continuously adapting to countermeasures. Electronic warfare and cyber attacks can compromise sensors, navigation, and communication in ways that render even the most advanced fighter momentarily blind and vulnerable. The battlefield has become multidimensional, and victory depends on mastering not just air combat, but a complex interplay of technology, strategy, and adaptability. History has repeatedly shown that underestimating such shifts, just as America did after World War II, can turn strength into vulnerability. Modern doctrine reflects this reality. Fighters are no longer expected to operate independently. They are integrated into an interconnected web of aircraft, drones, satellites, and command networks. Pilots are trained to coordinate with autonomous platforms, manage data streams in real time, and make instantaneous decisions under extreme uncertainty. Yet even with these capabilities, the lessons of post-World War II remain vital. Redundancy, adaptability, and preparedness cannot be replaced by technology alone. A fighter may be invisible to radar, faster than any adversary, and guided by the most sophisticated AI, but without skilled humans capable of improvising when systems fail. Its advantage is temporary. Technology amplifies potential, but human ingenuity determines outcomes. Emerging adversaries are fully aware of these dynamics. Nations such as China and Russia are developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit dependency on advanced systems. Hypersonic interceptors, AI-guided electronic attacks, and anti-satellite weapons aim to neutralize advantages before the first fighter engages. History's cycle repeats. Each time the United States innovates, Adversaries study, adapt, and seek vulnerabilities. The same pattern that nearly left American fighters vulnerable after World War II now plays out in a more technologically complex, faster-moving arena. Dominance is never permanent. Every innovation carries the seed of challenge. In preparing for these future conflicts, the United States is forced to blend lessons from the past with vision for the future. Fifth-generation fighters must evolve into sixth-generation platforms, capable of coordinating with autonomous systems, resisting cyber intrusion, and surviving in hypersonic threat environments. Training emphasizes not only technical proficiency, but mental flexibility, decision-making under extreme uncertainty, and the ability to adapt when the unexpected becomes reality. The principles established after World War II, adaptation, humility, and relentless vigilance, remain the foundation upon which modern air dominance is built. Ultimately, the story of American fighter aircraft after World War II is far from over. Each generation of fighters reflects a balance between power and fragility, between innovation and overconfidence. The sky has always been a proving ground where assumptions are tested and dominance is fleeting. Modern fighters, advanced as they are, exist within this continuum, carrying both the technological edge and the historical warning. No matter how advanced, no matter how skilled, the advantage must never be taken for granted. The cycle of challenge, adaptation, and survival continues, reminding every pilot, engineer, and strategist that the lessons of the past are never merely history. They are the blueprint for the future. From the hangars of post-World War II, America to the hypersonic-dominated battlefields of the 21st century, the story of American fighter aircraft is not a simple tale of machines or victories, but a chronicle of adaptation, survival, and the relentless pursuit of mastery over an ever-changing sky. Every era has tested assumptions. The post-war demobilization nearly left fleets abandoned in deserts, while the world innovated. The missile age threatened to make dogfighting obsolete, only to reveal the enduring necessity of skill. Stealth promised invincibility, yet dependence on technology introduced fragility. And now, unmanned systems, AI, and hypersonic weapons are challenging pilots and engineers in ways no one could have predicted. Across decades, the same cycle repeats. Dominance creates confidence, confidence breeds assumptions, assumptions invite challenge, and challenge forces evolution. What began with the P-51 Mustang hunting over Europe did not end with the F-35 gliding silently through a contested battlefield. The principle remains the same. Only through vigilance, adaptation, and respect for the unpredictable does true superiority endure. Modern fighters, as advanced and awe-inspiring as they are more than machines. They are lessons written in metal, fuel, software, and human ingenuity, each bearing the weight of every mistake, triumph, and hard-learned lessons since the moment the first propeller plane lifted from an airstrip in 1941. The men and women who design, build, and pilot these aircraft inherit a legacy forged in fire and shaped by trial. And every sortie they fly is a conversation with history itself. A reminder that mastery of the skies is never permanent, and every generation must earn it anew. And so, the story of America's fighter aircraft after World War II is not just the story of planes, pilots, or wars. It is the story of humanity confronting the sky, learning from every failure, every triumph, and every moment in between, and discovering time and again that the greatest weapon is not speed, stealth, or firepower, but the courage to adapt when the world refuses to behave as expected. Because in the end, the sky does not belong to the fastest jet, the most advanced missile, or the stealthiest shape. It belongs to those who respect its lessons, embrace its challenges, and understand that survival, dominance, and victory are earned not once, but every time the wheels leave the runway. And so the story of America's fighter aircraft after World War II comes full circle, not as a tale of machines, victories, or losses alone, but as a testament to the relentless rhythm of history, innovation, complacency, challenge, and adaptation. From the deserts of post-war storage to the skies over Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, and beyond, every generation of fighters has carried the weight of lessons learned the hard way, proving that dominance is never given, it is earned. Technology can inspire awe and the courage to confront the unexpected. Every pilot, engineer, and strategist who steps into the cockpit or designs the next generation of aircraft becomes part of this ongoing legacy, where the sky itself tests skill, judgment, and resolve. Because in the end, the ultimate truth remains: The skies do not belong to the fastest jet, the most advanced missile, or the stealthiest frame. They belong to those who understand their lessons, respect their power, and have the courage to rise again every time the world changes. And that more than any machine or weapon is what keeps America's fighters soaring through every era, every challenge, and every battle yet to come. Thanks for watching.